Okay, for this one we're going to do a study of the beetle, but we're going to apply our watercolour techniques that we've practiced. Start off by drawing a really simple beetle shape. Remembering that beetles are made up of 3 main parts. This is a slightly simplified version. So once you've drawn out your main shape, we're going to apply the different techniques that we've used. So I'm going to start off with a colour wash. So to do the colour wash, same as when you did it as your practice piece, you wet your page first with just water. And if you make sure you only put the water where you want the colour to go, it will have some control. Let's start with whatever colour you would like to be the background colour. For this one I'm going to use yellow. Load my brush up, put my yellow. Remember, if you want it to be lighter, you can use your palette to add more water. While that's wet, I'm going to bring in some other colours, so it's going to create a colour blend. So I'm going to load my brush up with some blue, and I'm going to add my blue around the edges of the beetle's body, allowing it to bleed into the yellow. Wash my brush and use just water to encourage the mixing of those colours. And allow that to dry. While that's drying, I'm going to do similar to the top part. Put a yellow on first. I'll leave a little bit more white this time because I want that to remain a darker blue. Add a tip of dark blue at that edge, then use water to allow the colours to blend together. And if you're clever the way you do it, you can create a bit of a three-dimensional looking form as well. If you get your darker edges, darker colours around the edge and leave a lighter colour on the top, it will enhance the kind of 3D form of the insect. For this one I'm just going to use flat colour. If you're finding it's a bit too watery, just scrape off the excess on the side of the pot. You might like to let some bits dry as well, because if you paint next to wet paint it will create a bleed. Sometimes you might want this, but other times you might want a bit more control. For the legs I'm going to do similar. So I'm going to put my first colour on the main bits. And then I'm going to bring blue for the edges. Remember the watercolour paper and paint, you don't want to do too many overworkings because the paper starts to come up, so you need to make sure you're working gently but only doing a few light touches on the paper. If your paper does start to bubble, you leave it, you let that bit dry, work on a different area while it's drying. Once it's dry, you'll be able to paint back over. So at the minute my head looks a bit too blue compared to the body, so I'm going to bring in a bit of yellow. Because watercolour paint will mix again once it gets wet, you can make small changes to it as you go, because once you make it wet again, it will blend. So I'm going to just blend in the edges of my legs, just using water, the tip of my brush. I can add patterns to my beetle as well if I want. I can use a glazing technique, so remember when you're going over the top with another colour. So you might want to bring in some patterns. You can work over the top. But remembering those colours will mix together, so thinking about the colours that you're going to use to whether they'll work. You might like to, again, just use water to soften any edges. You might want to then just use a dry brush to add any harder lines, harder edges, to create some more detail. Once it dries as well, you could work back over and add some finer details too.